first thing is that we must understand where we are coming from in order to appreciate where we're going. So when we talk about where we're coming from, I have to talk about my own experiences. Growing up in Tampa, Florida, back in the 40s and 50s, in Ybor City. Segregated community, but nevertheless, it was multicultural. We had Italians, we had Cubans, we had Jewish community, we had West Indians, Native Americans, and of course we had Afrikaners. But in those days we just called them colored. See, our name has changed so many times. Y'all don't know what our latest name is, do you?
No.
Oh, you know, you talk about African American, American Africans. That's a new one. Yeah, American Africans. That haven't caught on yet because of the news media. But after the day, we on. That's so you know what we're talking about when they say, yeah, American Africans. All right. That exposure had a lot to do with helping me understand and appreciate differences. Yes, my great-grandmother was a Seminole Indian in Florida. She weighed 500 pounds. My great-grandmama, 500 pounds. And she used to go to the meat market to weigh. Not on the regular scales because they didn't go that high. She was a guitar player, musician, owned her own house. No, not house, rooming house. Yeah, she had her own little hotel. Yeah. That's how she, experienced her life. And when we look at the independence, that's very important, economic independence. She found a way, to use her talents so she didn't have a job. You know what a job is, don't you? J-O-B, Journey of the Broke. So she had this idea in her mind that she wanted to be independent economically. And even in that day, I'm talking about back in the 20s now, all right? Yeah, that's what her life was like. And fortunately, she only had one little girl, and that was my grandmother, and she followed suit, except the 500 pounds. She didn't make that, but she was independent as well. What I experienced with her at an early age was the fact that she had a great sense of who she was. So that identity is the key thing. So one of the lessons that we learn in the movement is that we have to help our young people appreciate a positive identity. No, you heard that it's experiences that make the person. That's how two people could come out of the same home and have to eat the same collard greens and pig feet and pig ears, or the arroz con pollo, or either frijoles negros, all right, jerk chicken, or whatever, all that kind of stuff. And one goes in one direction and one goes in the other. It's the interpretation of the experiences that makes the person. That's why it's so important, yes, for you to talk to those little children and find out what they are thinking about what they are experiencing. Grandma, yeah, take the time and sit down and talk about feelings. How did you feel about this? How did you feel about the other? That's what's missing. So I had the benefit of Grandma. I used to hang around with her everywhere she went. So I know all about older women. Everything. Because I was a little boy and they didn't pay attention to me, but I was observing all things. And I learned a lot. Yes. Very valuable, okay? Education. Now leaving Tampa, Florida, going to college in Nashville, I got involved in the sit-in movement. And I moved very quickly to this. John Lewis, Diane Nash, okay? Those people you're talking about? All right? Yeah. The sit-in movement. One of the things that happened in Nashville, in 3 months, we desegregated all of the downtown lunch counters. That's because we had Jim Lawson, who had studied in India, Gandhi, okay? And he came back and he trained us in nonviolence. James Lawson Jr., Methodist preacher. He went to Vanderbilt University, Divinity School. But he couldn't eat at the Vanderbilt cafeteria. Okay? Yeah. Okay. Restrooms? I don't know. All right. But you could go to the Divinity School. That was the first breakthrough. But they expelled him from school because he came and taught us nonviolence at First Baptist Church. He never got arrested, down. You know, that's not how he got expelled. He was teaching us. And guess what happened? That's what I'm so proud of. The dean of the Divinity School resigned when they expelled him. You know, the Divinity School dean was white, right? Yeah. A couple of professors even resigned. All right? Now, what am I talking about? I'm talking about lessons that we learned from the movement. Change came because we were able to persuade the majority of the people that we were right in our cause. No change can take place unless you're able to win the support, if not the definite sympathy or action of the majority. Yes. And we were considered minority. But we had to persuade the majority. Who do you think voted for the Supreme Court decision in '54? They didn't have no minorities on there. Oh, the Civil Rights Bill of 1964? Who was the majority? Voters' Right Bill of '65? Who was the majority? That's what I'm talking about. On the Freedom Rides, about 40% of the people were white. Came from 11 different countries. Now watch this. Okay, the Montgomery movement was basically black people withdrawing from the buses and not riding. Because one of the things you have to do if you're going to bring about change is you got to get the people who are participating to withdraw their participation. Okay? Because it's a system. That's what we're talking about. Systems can't exist unless you have all parts working together. That's including your motor as well as your furnace. So what you have to do if you're going to bring about change, you have to dismantle the system or get non-cooperation from just one part. You don't need to do the whole thing. There's one segment of the system to withdraw. They call it boycott. All right? Montgomery bus boycott. That was a strategy that was used in Montgomery to desegregate the buses. People didn't have any marches. They didn't have any pickets. They didn't have any protests. They just stayed off the bus and walked. And what happened is that from a really, might say, inner strength, what happened is that people began to walk. Now remember, it was December when it started. Okay, let's not forget that. Okay, they had to go through the spring, okay, where it was raining and all that. It's when you decide to suffer for the cause that is right, a cause that you believe in, and you make the decision to suffer, not somebody else. You take it on yourself. Voluntary suffering for the right cause builds character. That's what we're talking about. Character. When you make sacrifices for the things that you know are right, it strengthens and builds character. The whites who left their homes in the north and went down to go to jail or to be beaten. Yes. So what we're talking about here, when we talk about nonviolence, and we talk about Martin Luther King, and we talk about Mahatma Gandhi, we're talking about examples of people who understood suffering. They were not strangers to jail, Mandela, and many others. The question is, what makes you think that you're going to change this system that's been in existence all this time and has been so vicious by your suffering? What makes you think that you're going to change something? Here's the key to it. In addition to taking on the suffering on a personal level, you've got to have a strategy for helping to bring out the best in others. See, we all have the greatest potential for good as well as the greatest potential for evil. We were made that way. Okay? Yeah, we can do some dirty, low-down things. All you gotta do is watch the news every day, and that's what you get, over and over again. Some dirty, low-down things that people do. So the point is, they're also capable of doing some good things, and some great things, and making some sacrifices. So this is the lessons that we have to examine. CORE went as far as it could. People were beaten up, people were bashed. I signed up for the original Freedom Rides, but I needed parental permission because I was only 20 and you had to be 21 to go on your own. But you could get parental permission. In other words, if your parents signed some papers and gave you permission, then you could go. And of course, I sent my papers down to Tampa, Florida. And of course, my mother, she finished the, I think she finished the 8th grade. My father finished the 7th. And I told him, I was a freshman to go to college. I said, could you just go ahead and, I called up. Told him to sign these papers for me. I needed those papers right away. 2 weeks later, no papers. I called on the phone. I said, Daddy, did you get those papers that I sent you? He said, yeah, as a matter of fact, I did. I said, could you go ahead and sign them and send them back right away? He said, do you think I didn't read them? And I said quietly to myself, I was hoping you didn't read them. Could you just sign the papers and send them back? You know what his response was? I'm not going to sign your death warrant. No. So I didn't go on the original ride. But when the ride got stopped, because of the Anderson burning and also because of Birmingham, they beat him up and that kind of thing, etc. Those of us in Nashville took on the ride and continued it. We dropped out of school in the midst of our exams. You know why the Nashville group, now that was not the only sit-in group around. They did it in North Carolina, South Carolina. They had sit-ins all over except Mississippi. Okay? Why do you think the Nashville group took on the Freedom Rides? There were 3 reasons. First of all, John Lewis was on the original ride. He was off temporarily going to Philadelphia to fill out some application for the American Friends Service Committee to go abroad, the visa program. Okay? So he was temporarily off the ride. But he had all the information. So we had direct access to information, number one, and that's very key. Next is that Diane Nash had just gotten out of jail in North Carolina. What was it? There's Rock Hill. That's South Carolina or North Carolina?
South Carolina.
South Carolina, with some high school students. Guess what else? When the Nashville group demonstrated downtown and desegregated the lunch counters downtown, we also desegregated the Greyhound bus station lunch counters. So we'd already taken care of the Greyhound bus station. We were no strangers to the station. We knew that it could be integrated and desegregated. Okay? So we took off. And by the way, before we went on Freedom Rides, that spring we had already desegregated the movie theaters, all 5 of them downtown. We were on a roll. So getting on the bus to continue to ride was just another roll. Now guess what? When we got to Montgomery, Alabama, first of all, we stayed overnight in Birmingham trying to get to Montgomery. Nobody wanted to drive the buses. So here we were, okay, there. And we couldn't even get off to Montgomery because the bus drivers refused to drive. I remember we would go up and try to get on the bus and everything. You know what they would say? The bus driver would say, "Are y'all from COPE or the NAACP?" It's National White People's Organization. Okay. No, we're not from that group. Well, I'm not giving my life to that group. Okay? They took off. Wouldn't ride the bus. Stayed overnight. The first time I saw the Ku Klux Klan in their uniforms. And by the way, did you know the Imperial Wizard was a minister? Robert Shelton. Yeah. He didn't have a white robe. He had a black robe with a huge serpent on the back. Just a little man, you know, walking around, very much in charge, directing the Klan. They stomped our feet and threw water on us because we were there overnight and some of us were going to sleep. And I said they meant it for harm, but it was a good idea for us to stay awake with the Klan walking around. So we thanked them for keeping us awake. Yeah, they didn't mean that, but you know, that was good. We finally got to Montgomery, Alabama, and a mob came out of the bus station and went straight to the reporters. Beat up the reporters, smashed cameras and everything. We knew they were coming after us next. Now here's a clue to you. In Alabama, it wasn't about the buses. How could it be about the buses when the Montgomery city buses are already desegregated? Yeah. They were already, black folks were already riding the bus in Montgomery. So what they care about some bus coming through Montgomery with some folks on it? These are lessons now. Lessons mean dig deep. Interpret actions. Don't just report actions. Why were they concerned about, okay, and bringing out all this mob violence? We came all the way through South Carolina, and somebody got hit in North Carolina, but ain't nobody had no mobs out there. The bus had already come from Washington, D.C. all the way down, even through Atlanta. You know what they did in Atlanta? They made all the black folks who were riding on the front of the bus temporary white folks. You know, for a day. You know. Let them go ahead and eat and everything and then bye. You know, white for a day. Why Alabama? Why Montgomery? A big old mob coming out there. It wasn't about the bus. It was the bus station. You get my point? That's why they were waiting, and they didn't allow us to get in the bus station. They met us out there where the bus parked. Because they knew if we desegregated the lunch counters downtown bus station, the next step would be Five and Dime, Woodward, and all the rest of it downtown. You get my point? So you have to always analyze why people behave the way they do. Don't just get mad with them. And I know sometimes we don't understand. That's why we say, well, why do they act that way? Well, that should be a not fussing point. That should be a real question for research. Okay? So one of the lessons, another lesson, is that we must do our research. So I was in the Freedom Rides, and I stayed down in Mississippi, and this time, they didn't have one Freedom Rider from Jackson, Mississippi. And we're sitting in jail. Not one from Jackson. So Jim Bevel and I got out of jail. We said we're going to stay in Mississippi, and we're going to start recruiting folks from Mississippi. Because if you're going to desegregate the facilities and people never used them there, never was on the Freedom Rides, how do we know they're going to use the facilities? So we got to make sure. And that's what we did. We stayed there. In 2 weeks, we recruited 42 people from Jackson, Mississippi. And half of them were gang members. We go over to the basketball court and snatch the ball. You know, we were strangers, you know. I could say, you must not be from around here. Okay. He said, y'all want to fight? I said, yeah, we want to fight. They didn't know what it was about, but if you want to fight, that's what gangs do, fight. Okay. And I said, okay, we're going downtown, we're going to fight segregation. We don't care. We've been to jail before. Well, we had to train them in nonviolence, that's the point. After we finish our intensive training, we say you have to show up 6 o'clock the next morning. Anybody came 5 minutes after 6 a.m., they had to wait until the next day. So we had to know that if they, okay, somebody showed up 6 o'clock to go to jail, they had to be serious. And that was our test, final test, to see if they were serious about sticking with this. We couldn't get them in jail, and then they go and start crying and saying these northern agitators persuaded us. You know, we had to make sure they had the conviction. That's the next lesson. There's no substitute for training. The training of the leadership had all to do with the effectiveness of the movement. Yes, Martin Luther King, on his executive staff of SCLC, had more people who were trained in Nashville by Jim Lawson. Okay? So you're doing the right thing. That's why I'm here. I'm very excited about the training that you're going to do. And you can make just a world of difference. You see that? Okay. Next thing is, went back to school for a little while because my mother said, you're not going to ever finish school. I said, yes, I am, Mama. No, you're not. No. I said, yes, I am going to finish school. I'm going to register now. She said, yeah, you're going to register, but how long are you going to stay there? So you better be out here aggravating folk about segregation. I said, I'm going to finish school. And well, eventually I did. I had a master's and, you know, doctorate from Harvard University and handed it to her. You know what her response was? Thank you. Then I remember back in psychology about negative inspiration. So how does she know about negative inspiration? Tell me I'm not going to do it, I'll do it. Yeah, you have to know your children. And use what you know. All right? Okay. Fast forward. American Friends Service Committee wanted to start a program in Chicago, Urban Affairs. I was the first director of Urban Affairs for the American Friends Service Committee. We started in Chicago, experimented with nonviolence in the urban, northern urban community. We did that. The next thing is that Martin Luther King wanted to respond to Rochester, the riots. And we came back 50 years ago. Andrew Young, myself, Bevel. I'm not sure about Jose. I have to think about it some more. But there were 7 of us all together. Really bold was one. And we came and we met with the gang members and the different gangs right here in Rochester, New York. Clarissa Street? Yeah. Crash helicopter? Yes. The Undertakers? That's the name of the gang. Because they would undertake anything. The Diplomats? Oh, I thought of another name. You know, I was trying to struggle about it. Ambassadors. Yes, it's coming back. A little bit slow, but it's coming back. Now think about gangs named diplomats and ambassadors, and do you understand the mentality of these young gang members? They were talking about aspiration, not exasperation. You name a gang the diplomats, and they wore high-top hats and split-tail coats. What were they talking about? That's what their aspiration was. Nobody picked up on it, though. That's the problem. They're telling us what they want, but nobody's listening. Okay? Yeah. Okay. Final one. AVP. Honey Knopp was a Quaker. She had been contacted by Larry Apsey, upstate New York. And they wanted to start a program in the prison. So in El Reno, Oklahoma, there was a riot, and an inmate had been killed. And inmates who didn't want to be in part of the riots, when they were there, and after those who were involved in the fight returned to their cell blocks, they beat up the ones who didn't come and join. And those were the ones who said, we don't want to fight, we're not in here for that, I just want to serve my term and get out of here. I'm not involved with all that conflict. They asked for help, the inmates. Honey Knopp, part of the federal prison program, visitors program, federal visitors prison program. She called me. She said, I need you to go to El Reno. We went, and that was my first training inside the prison as a non-inmate, because I've been in 27 times myself, okay? So I'm very familiar with the ins and outs of jail, okay? Then Green Haven, Larry Apsey, Quaker, AVP. I developed the first curriculum in Green Haven. And they just discovered me last year. This was in 1975. The Angels and all those people. Yeah. New York. Yeah. They're the ones that we trained. They train the inmates, we train the inmates to be trainers. And we took those who were lifers in Green Haven and took them down to Goshen, the juvenile facility, and they trained the juveniles. Can you imagine that? Now I understand that the program is in 50 countries around the world and 30 states in the U.S. That's what it's called institutionalizing nonviolence. That is what we must do in Rochester and every other, okay? Must be part of our educational system. And that's our challenge. We don't have to live with this violence, and nor do we have to die with it. Because if we don't do something about it, then we're not going to live with it. We're going to die with it. Or watch others. So, with that, I say that I'm glad to be here, and I'm glad you're here. And let's talk. Thank you.